The fire goes out. Not slowly, not gently. In an instant, the shelter collapses inward as gray shapes explode through the hide walls. Snarling, tearing, yellow eyes catching the last dying embers. A child screams. Someone grabs a burning stick and swings it wildly into darkness. But the wolves are already inside. They have already won. In the chaos of that frozen night, everything this small band worked to build their food, their shelter, their sense of safety is ripped away in seconds. And as the survivors stumble into the bitter cold, bleeding and terrified, only one question matters. What happens when the wolves come back? 3 days before the attack, this frozen world seemed almost manageable. Kuro led the small group of 11 souls across the wind-scoured steppe, following the edge where sparse forest met open grassland. He was not the oldest, but he was the steadiest. Decisions came to him naturally. Beside him walked Mara, who carried her youngest against her chest, wrapped in layers of scraped hide. Her older son Tem, barely 12 winters, stayed close to the rear, watching for any movement in the distant tree line. They had found a good spot, a natural hollow protected from the worst winds, with a frozen stream nearby and enough deadfall for fuel. The shelter went up quickly, a frame of bent branches lashed with sinew, covered in layered hides weighted down with stones and packed snow. Inside, dried grass created bedding. The fire pit sat near the entrance, positioned so smoke would drift outward rather than fill the space. It was not luxury. It was survival architecture refined through countless generations. Food was scarce, but present. A cache of frozen meat from a successful hunt hung in a tree at the camp's edge. Dried fish, rendered fat stored in a bladder. Enough for perhaps 10 days if they remained careful. The group settled into rhythms of cold weather survival, maintaining fire, mending clothing, watching the perimeter, keeping children quiet and warm. But they made a critical error. And this is where understanding Ice Age survival becomes essential. The meat cache was positioned downwind of the camp. When they lit their fire each evening, smoke carried scent away from where they slept. This seemed logical. Keep the smell of food away from your sleeping area. But it created a scent trail leading directly toward their most valuable resource. And something in the darkness had been following that trail for days. Wolves in this frozen world were not the wolves of warmer lands. These were massive creatures, shaped by endless winters and desperate hunger. A pack could bring down animals many times their size through patience and coordination. They learned patterns. They watched. They waited. The night of the attack began with silence. Kuro noticed it first, the absence of small sounds that usually filled the darkness. No wind through branches, no distant calls, just frozen stillness. Then the first howl split the night. Close. Too close. Kuro reached for his spear, but before his fingers touched the shaft, gray shapes burst through the shelter entrance. The hide covering tore under their weight. One wolf went straight for the meat cache. Others flooded the shelter itself, drawn by warmth and the scent of humans huddled inside. What followed was pure chaos. Mara threw herself over her children. Tem grabbed a burning branch and swung it desperately. The fire scattered across the bedding, creating more confusion than light. Someone was bitten. Kuro felt teeth close on his arm before he could react. In the end, they fled. All 11 of them, stumbling into darkness with almost nothing. The wolves did not pursue. They had what they wanted. The meat cache was already being torn apart. The shelter was destroyed, and the small band of survivors huddled together in the open cold, bleeding and exposed, facing a night that would kill them just as surely as teeth and claws. This is the moment where most people imagine the story ends. The wolves won. The humans lost. Simple and brutal. But here is what Ice Age survival actually required. The ability to lose everything, and still think clearly enough to survive the next hour. Kuro gathered the group and forced them to move. Staying still meant freezing. They walked through darkness until they found a dense thicket where wind could not reach them directly. It was barely protection, but it would keep them alive until dawn. Mara examined wounds. Kuro's arm bled freely, but the muscle was intact. 2 others had deep scratches. Using snow to clean the wounds and strips torn from remaining clothing to bind them, she worked quickly. Infection was a death sentence in this world, but immediate bleeding was worse. Tim had saved one thing during the chaos, a small clay pot containing embers from their fire, wrapped in layers of moss and hide. This was standard practice. Fire was too precious to risk losing completely. Even in disaster, protecting that ember was pure instinct. By dawn, They had a small fire burning in a hollow between fallen trees. They had almost no food. Their shelter was destroyed. Several people were injured. Temperature was dropping. And somewhere nearby, a wolf pack had just learned that attacking this group meant easy meals. Here is the detail most people miss about predator behavior. Wolves do not forget success. When an attack works, when they drive prey from shelter and claim food without serious injury, they learn to repeat that approach. The pack would return. Maybe the next night, maybe in 2 days, but they would return. Kuro understood this, not in words, perhaps, but in the deep practical wisdom that came from a lifetime of watching and surviving. The question was not whether the wolves would come back. The question was what the group would do when they did. The answer was not to run. Running meant dying slowly in the cold, away from any shelter, with injuries draining strength. The answer was to make the next attack cost the wolves so much that they would never try again. This is where the trap came in. What I am about to describe is not a construction guide. Ice Age trapping methods varied enormously based on terrain, available materials, and target species. What matters here is the principle: creating a situation where predators encounter consequences instead of rewards. The group spent the first day after the attack in careful preparation. Kuro sent Tem to scout the old campsite. The wolves were gone, but they had left clear signs of their presence: tracks, scat, the destroyed remnants of the meat cache. Tem noted the direction they had departed. Wolves often follow the same routes repeatedly. The new shelter went up in a different location, chosen with defensive thinking. They found a spot where a rock outcropping created a natural wall on one side. Dense brush grew thick on another. This left only 2 directions of approach, and one faced directly into the prevailing wind, not a direction wolves would choose when hunting. The single accessible approach became the focus of their preparation. Here is what they built. Using natural terrain, they created a narrow corridor leading toward the shelter. Fallen branches, piled stones, and banked snow formed barriers on either side. Any wolf approaching would be funneled into this channel. Within the channel, they created obstacles. Not to kill wolves are powerful, and a simple snare rarely stops a determined pack. Instead, obstacles were designed to create hesitation and noise. Branches laid across the path that would crack underfoot. Stones balanced to fall with a clatter. Strips of hide strung between stakes that would tangle legs briefly before tearing. Most importantly, they created response points. Positions where a human with a spear or burning torch could suddenly appear, blocking the corridor and confronting any animal that entered. The element of surprise would be on their side this time. Mara contributed something crucial. She understood scent in ways the others did not. The disaster at the original camp had been partly caused by the scent trail leading to their food. This time, she insisted on scattering strong-smelling materials around the perimeter: ash, mixed with certain bitter plants, scattered at intervals, burned fur from previous kills. None of this would stop hungry wolves, but it would slow them, make them cautious. The trap was not a killing device. It was a system designed to transform a confident attack into a confusing, frightening, and unsuccessful experience. 2 nights passed. The group slept in shifts, always with watchers positioned at the corridor entrance. Kuro's arm had swollen, but the wound was not festering. They had managed to hunt a few small animals. Hope began returning. And then, on the 3rd night, the howling began again. Kuro signaled silence. Everyone took their positions. Tim crouched at the first response point, torch ready, but unlit. Mara stayed with the children in the shelter's deepest corner. 2 other hunters positioned themselves at intervals along the corridor. The pack approached from downwind, exactly as expected. At least 6 wolves, moving in their characteristic spread formation, but banked snow and piled debris forced them to converge. By the time they reached the corridor entrance, they were bunched together, confused by the narrow space. The first wolf entered. Its paw struck a carefully placed branch, which cracked sharply in the frozen silence. The wolf hesitated. Behind it, others pressed forward, but balanced stones shifted and fell with a rattling cascade. Suddenly, the pack was tripping over obstacles, tangling in hide strips, unable to move with their usual coordination. This was the moment. Tem lit his torch and stepped forward, blocking the corridor. At the same instant, Kuro rose from concealment with his spear leveled. Another hunter appeared with a flaming branch. The wolves, which had expected terrified prey, suddenly faced fire and sharp points from multiple directions in a confined space. One wolf lunged toward Tem. He swung the torch and caught the animal across the muzzle. The smell of singed fur filled the air. Another tried to retreat but tangled in hide strips strung across the path. It thrashed, panicking, and its panic spread instantly. Within moments, the pack was fleeing, not regrouping, not circling, fleeing in genuine terror, yelping and stumbling over each other. The trap had worked. But here is the lesson. The wolves were not killed. They were frightened, and that fear was more valuable than dead animals. A killed wolf might bring scavengers. A frightened wolf would remember. It would associate this place with confusion, pain, and fire appearing from nowhere. It would not come back. The nights that followed were quiet. The pack had found easier territory, and the 11 survivors had done something remarkable. They transformed devastating loss into knowledge. They learned from failure. They adapted. This is the deepest truth about Ice Age survival. It was never about individual strength. It was about watching, remembering, and sharing what worked. Kuro could not have designed the trap alone. Mara's understanding of scent was essential. Tem's courage made the difference. Even children, staying silent when silence meant survival, played their role. If this story kept you watching, something connected. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done differently. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more survival stories from the ancient world. Share this with someone who would appreciate it. And remember, the wolves thought they had won. They were wrong.